Greetings, everyone. I'm Mar. Once again, this is my opinion. Now we come to an episode that I usually always skip. I think I've maybe watched about 5 times since I've gotten the DVDs. But it's one that when I do watch it, I do have a little bit of fun with it. And that's because it tackles an issue that so far the show has not picked up on, which is odd considering that Ray is the only parent that works and Debra is essentially a stay-at-home mom. You would think at least in passing they would tackle this, and that of course is Debra, if ever, wanting to go back to work. Because don't think they've mentioned it in passing that much so far, but she used to work in PR. They'll mention it a couple more times. And with the kids getting older, it's one of those things that maybe she'd have the itch to go to work, if not for helping them stay afloat because Ray makes plenty of money, but just for her own self-gratification. And that, of course, is Working Girl. In addition to the topic, this is also notable, for this is the episode that they were filming when Peter Boyle suffered his heart attack on set. Now, there is no commentary for the episode, so they don't directly say that, and if I remember correctly on the commentary for the season finale, they don't mention it directly. But I managed to find out roundaboutly by listening to Peter Boyle's interview where he talks about his heart attack and how it felt. And I'm going to include the link for that interview in the description below. How did I figure out it was this episode? Because he mentions that he was rehearsing a scene with Julie Haggerty, who is only in this episode. She plays the lady that Debra worked with. And of course, because of his heart attack, this is the first of 3 episodes that Peter doesn't appear in. Now, what happened on set is that him and Julie were blocking out the scene, rehearsing it, and he started to have a cold sweat and cough. And being how Peter is, he joked like, "Hey, I'm probably having a heart attack." He made the joke with the assistant director. The director looked at him and go, "Yeah, Peter, you don't really look too good. Maybe you are." So they decided to have the ambulance come look at him. They rolled him, and then of course they took him to the hospital to check, and apparently he had a blocked artery. Peter bounced back after 2 weeks after they did the little operation on his ticker. And you could see he still does have some energy in the next couple seasons. But about halfway through the show's run, you can definitely tell that his heart attack and other health-related issues are starting to get the better of him, because his energy level plummets. Whereas in these few seasons, he had that very energetic delivery, and he do a lot of facial expressions. The episode Ping Pong is probably the best example. "You mean this face?" And of course, all the fluctuation of his enunciation. That's why I compare how he is in the first half and the second half to how Carlin is with his HBO comedy career. Where the first half, very peppy, very energetic in his stage presence. The writing is good all throughout, but he has to compensate more with a different dry delivery later on and concentrate more on the performance than the physicality. Although with Carlin, every now and then he would add something. "But it was your daughter's funeral." Whereas second half of the show here, Peter really has to concentrate on just the performance and how he delivers a dialogue in a dry manner. Definitely makes for a different type of Frank Barone, but it's still peppy and still keeps in character with him. And you definitely tell Peter's still there, he just doesn't have the same energy level. And of course they compensate for it by giving him great lines like they always do. And of course, in regards to him bouncing back after 2 weeks, Peter had this to say: "I'm just a tough guy." And of course, due to him not being there, as he said, they shot around me. Which, with this episode going in this time, I knew that there was probably going to be a scene or two that felt like, it felt like Frank should be here. And I definitely can see that a little bit. It doesn't feel like there's a huge chunk missing, but there's at least one moment in the episode where I feel that at least a line or two from Frank would have been warranted, and that's when Marie finds out that Debra is going in for the job interview. It feels like that both of them should be there, and then later on when she brings the comfort food, it feels like Frank at least should be in tow or sitting around and then make a comment or two. It's missed, but it doesn't hurt the episode overall. I'm just wondering, what was the scene that he was rehearsing with Julie Haggerty? Was he the one that went over and tried to get her job back? Did Ray go to talk with her and then find Frank was there? Or did he show up afterwards? A lot of questions. It makes me wonder how that scene would have gone. Would have been interesting, nice little bit of character development for Frank, showing he really does care about Debra, but alas, we don't. And of course, if I don't have all the episode lists right in front of me, but I believe the next episode Frank actually is in, so it's not like they have like 3 episodes in a row where he's not there. They air them in a different order since there's not a lot of hardcore continuity between them. Now, Debra, after she gets the job, you could tell she really does want to make it work, but she gets fired on the first day, sadly, and part of that is due to her attitude. As her boss says when she's talking with Ray, and as we could tell when she's telling Ray herself, Debra has changed in the years since she stopped working. It's probably been a little under a decade now, because if I remember right, she stopped working right after she got pregnant with Allie, which, since they're approaching their 10-year anniversary at this point, would have been probably 7 years before, 8 years before. So she started to change a little bit after that, got a little bit more stubborn due to the fact she has to deal with Frank and Marie, more so after they moved across the street a couple years before this. So she's a little less likely to accept major criticism, especially from someone that doesn't know the clientele as much. Now, the job that she's tasked with is to develop a mascot for a pizza chain, and she comes up with Professor Pete-za. Nice little pun, but of course she goes, our clients aren't looking for puns. I don't know why puns usually work. Not the best pun, but it could work, especially if you're aiming it at kids. And Debra does know a thing or two about kids. However, this is not the first time we see that maybe she doesn't know as much as she thinks she does, or thinks she knows more than she does. I mean, look at the children's book episode. I mean, it looked like Allie liked the one that Ray wrote better, but that's because he's the professional writer. And then, of course, there's that whole thing that she even puts at the end of that episode that Allie probably only liked yours better because she heard it last. That's probably right. But she argues to death with her boss, and her boss fires her. It's one thing she definitely forgot, is that you can argue your point to a little bit, but there's a point where you got to pull back. And of course, Debra rightly goes and blames it on the fact that this is the first time she's had a woman boss. And that even without her change, she probably would still be fighting it like this. But I'd say it's more how her personality changed than over the fact that she's working for a female. Because I've had woman bosses before, and I don't really notice a major difference. But maybe that's just me. Working in security is a little different than working in PR. So maybe there it might be a little different. However, I still say it's probably a little bit of more in Debra's camp than it is in the PR one. But it could also be the fact that we see that there's only 2 other employees besides the owner here, that it's a small startup, and that's why she's really getting hard on it. We got to get clients, and because of that, she goes a little bit too overboard on Debra. And the few scenes we see Julie Haggerty in this, we can really see that, especially the scene where she keeps answering the phone. It's like, I don't want it. Pfft. That moment, it's like, all right, definitely a little bit of the boss. Now, Marie does start in with her usual comments when she finds out about this, as to where it'd be expected. She's commenting about the children's weight, which, no matter which season it is, whenever I hear her make comments about that, I'm like, really, Marie? Really, the kids are too skinny? They are fine. With Marie doing that, if it was up to her, the kids would be as fat as me. And then she even calls them latchkey children at one point. It's like, really, Marie? Really? That one definitely strikes me as something of her generation, that, you know, only the dad works, the mother stays home with the kids and watches them. But then again, she goes too far in that opposite direction, to the point where, as we find out in a couple episodes, the kids rebelled. I mean, we had a season 3 episode not that long ago about Ray rebelling. You had a party in my house. And as we're going to find out in I think it's a season 5 episode, even with Frank's sternness, they still rebelled. So it's like, you got to find the right balance. I mean, I think probably the ideal balance is closer to what we find out about Debra's parents in that same episode, but they're just a little bit too over the line. You got to get closer to the line. The latchkey children commenting. We also find a nice little bit of lore about Robert in his backstory, that at one point as a kid he wanted to work at NASA. But of course his family squashed that rum. As Ray points out, he wouldn't have been able to fit into the capsule, but he wanted to work for Mission Control. He ended up being a cop that still works on the radio, but I would have been interested in hearing him. You're clear for takeoff. Houston, we have a problem. What's the problem? That would have been interesting hearing that deep voice on the other end of the Mission Control. This is Houston, go ahead. There's a couple moments that really sum up Ray and his man-childishness. And part of it is he's trying to talk Debra out of getting the job, but he's failing at it because he's trying to come across passive aggressively or subtly, and he's failing at it. And I love how easily Debra picks up on it. And then she calls him out on it. It's like, you just don't want to do any work around here. And his response is what sums up his man-childishness. Why is that so wrong? Like, really, Ray? This is the reason why in a few seasons time I'm actually glad they tackled this in another way, that he wished he had a mother instead of a wife. It's like, Jesus Christ. That's not what your wife is supposed to do. She's not supposed to coddle you like that. It works for Frank and Marie's marriage because she needs to do that, but not all marriages are supposed to be like that. You're supposed to be partners, not one being subservient to the other. And Ray, very, very lazy. I seem to do more around the house than Ray does. And of course, the episode is all fun. It's a Cindy Chupak episode, so nice to see her name on here again. She does manage to capture and balance the whole relationship with Ray and Debra at points. Debra wanting to prove her worth by going back to work, failing at it as we see, saying that she has changed a little bit. Julie Haggerty, good. This is not the first time I saw her. She was in that made-for-TV Disney movie Tourist Trap, which maybe I'll tackle one of these days because it has Daniel Stern and Paul Giamatti in it. It would be nice to start reviewing some of those TV movies, along with, the one involving the Philadelphia Eagles, among other ones. She was also in a 2004 episode of S3E22, so she's done some work. That's something I like. I like when they get some guest stars that have done stuff, of course. So far, the highest profile one, not counting the sports figures, has been from season 1. I mean, can't get bigger than someone that played Quark's wife in 2 episodes. Come to Quark's. Quark's is fun. It's a fun episode. Would have been nice to see how the original version was if Peter didn't have his heart attack, but alas, as I've said multiple times, what if the 2 most dangerous words? Do I see myself still skipping this episode? Maybe, because this is an episode I still have to be in the mood to watch. I do identify with it a little bit more now that I'm watching it grown up. I've been in the workforce for a handful of years, semi-degree. Know a little bit more how things are going from the boss's side and then balancing it with Debra's side a bit more instead of just having an outsider one like, I don't know. But because of that, it's one I have to be in the mood for. But it's another diamond in the rough of the ones I skip. So it is nice, and it just is another little cherry on top of why I think Season 3 is one of the better seasons. And of course, after this, we're going to get another episode involving marriage. And this one is going to be very interesting. And the title alone does sum up one thing you got to find out when it comes to marriage, and that is, to paraphrase a certain duo, or should I say quote, be excellent to each other.